Welcome to our May membership meeting. See, we got a couple more folks coming in here. I'm Jeff Zimmer. I'm your president of this fine, outstanding Lake Gaston Association. Before I get in and talk about the panel discussion this morning, I just wanted to bring you up to date on a few activities that the association is working on. The government relations has and is working with Mecklenburg County for a community listening session, which takes place tomorrow night, beginning 6:30 at Lake Gaston Volunteer Fire Department. This is a means and an effort for the community to hear about Mecklenburg County's comprehensive plan, get an update, and provide feedback to the county officials. And again, that's tomorrow night, Lake Gaston Volunteer Fire Department. This Saturday, we've got a couple events. Keystone event for us is the Jack Saunders Annual Shred Event. This takes place at the Roanoke Wildwood Fire Department. We start at 10 o'clock and we'll be there with the shred truck till 1 o'clock. So come by if you have any documents you want shredded, let your neighbors and friends know that they can come by and we'll unload them and run them through the shredder. Also this Saturday, the Quality Water Assurance Awareness Campaign, QUAC, is doing their Bridge and Back Walk Fun Run. And that sign-up's at 8 across the street here at the Chamber of Commerce. The event starts at 9, and your Lake Environment Committee will have a booth set up there, helping with the water quality awareness. The Environment Committee is also getting out this month and is taking a look at all of the habitat enhancement enclosures or cages to look at the quality of the plants and determine what work will be done, and the actual work project takes place in June. The Lake Cleanup Committee has set up a process whereby you can go to the Chamber of Commerce. They have trash bags, they have the picker-uppers, whatever those are called, some vests, and if you want to take some time and do some trash cleanup in your neighborhood along a stretch of road, anywhere in the community, that equipment is there and available for your use. And we appreciate the Chamber of Commerce working with us on that project. And one other thing that, if you're not aware, if you're a Warren County resident, the county managers have put forward a proposal to change funding of the volunteer fire departments. This will essentially reduce the direct funding from the county's general fund to the volunteer fire departments and require that the fire departments, in order to continue those services, would have to increase the fire district tax. The main reason for this is that the county wants to fund a senior center, a farmer's market, and number 4 EMS station, which will go out at Owen. This association has worked closely with the Water Safety Council and the 9/11 Task Force. We have drawn up a position statement. It's posted on our website. We are not opposed to these improvements in Warren County. We are opposed to the way the county is trying to institute a tax increase by pushing it into the responsibility of the volunteer fire departments. Each fire department has a tax board that sets the tax rate based on income that they see from the rates. Any additional funding they might get from grants, for instance, fundraising activities. That all goes in the mix along with what the expenditures are, and they set a rate. For instance, I'm in Churchill Five Forks, and our rate is 4.5 cents. So that's for every $100, you pay 4.5 cents. $100 on your property value. Let me be clear on that. But if this goes through, that will change, and it will have to be increased to a little over 6 cents. Now that's not a huge amount of money for me as an individual, but countywide, we're talking about $880,000 that the county will no longer fund the volunteer fire departments and force them to increase these rates. So anyways, we've taken a position. There's a position statement on the website. We've sent that into the county commissioners. If you're in Warren County, you need to be aware of this situation. And next Tuesday, Monday, thank you, the 6th, the county commissioners are having a meeting, and this proposal will be discussed. So if you feel strongly enough about it, as many of us do, you'll want to attend that. But there are members of our association and our government relations team that will be there. Okay, moving on, our panel discussion. We have 3 realtors with us this morning. We're going to give each one of them an opportunity to kind of give us a quick introduction to who they are. Tell us a little bit something about themselves, and then we'll start with some questions. So I'll start with Crystal Dickens. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Crystal.
Stay seated. I'll stay seated, I guess. Well, hi, Crystal Dickens. I work with Pointe Realty Group. I'm also a Lake Gaston resident. I live at what I call Magic Mile 13 because I love the sunsets at our mile point there if you're on the lake, which is in Ebony, Virginia, also Brunswick County, in a small subdivision called Water Chase. My husband and I have been here for well more than 20 years. You may be familiar with Dickens Plumbing. That is my husband's company. And so we love Lake Gaston. We've raised our children here, and we want to stay here and be a proud member of the community. I've been selling real estate for 20 years, and I love what I do. There's lots of topics right now that are shaking up the real estate market, and also that are important to Lake Gaston. So appreciate the idea that you brought this to fruition for us to be able to do this today. Look forward to hearing from you guys.
Our next panelist is Barney Watson.
I'm Barney Watson. I'm with Lake Gaston Real Estate. Small company I started 4 years ago, doing pretty well. Been selling real estate here for 25 years. Moved to the area full time in '92, I believe. Had a house in Eaton Ferry Estates. We sold that probably 4 or 5 years ago. We got 25 acres out in the country. So, but again, just to echo Crystal, there's a lot of misinformation going around the media about the real estate industry right now. So hopefully we clear some of those topics up as well. But Jeff and the association, thank you for giving us this opportunity.
And final panelist is Chad.
Yeah, I'm Chad Barber. I'm with Lake Gaston Properties, and I've lived here my whole life. I'm 52 years old, and we first found Lake Gaston. We lived in South Hill, my parents and my brother and I, and when I was 12 years old, they bought our first place, a little single-wide trailer right outside of Hawks Nest in Bracey, with probably one of the best sunset views you'll ever see. And so I've grown up at the lake and on the lake, really mine for the last 40 years. And so I've been selling real estate for about 15 years here at the lake, and it's a fun. I love doing it. It's a passion I've always had, and I appreciate you guys having us, and hopefully we can provide some insight as to the market today, and hopefully answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks for attending, and we appreciate your participation, taking time to share your experience and knowledge with us. Okay, let's start at the national level. This recent lawsuit I don't know if I would call it a settlement, but maybe you can help us better understand what exactly happened, what's been agreed to, and what might the impact be at a national level to the real estate market. I'll throw this to you, Crystal.
Sure. Are most of you, show of hands, familiar that there is a lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors? Okay, so it was an antitrust lawsuit. It's kind of, you know, without digging into a lot of the details, basically it was an antitrust lawsuit. When you go to list your house with a realtor, you fill out your listing agreement, you agree upon a commission that you're going to pay as a seller, and typically you're offering that commission to a buyer's agent. The realtor then in turn takes the listing information and puts it into an MLS sheet, and then that goes into our system, our MLS system, that then populates out to Zillow and Realtor.com and all that. We have agreements for fees. So you put that commission in there, that commission rate of what you're willing to pay a buyer's agent or to a firm. Actually, it's to the firm. And the argument that the attorneys won on was that that is considered price fixing because not all firms were negotiating their rates. That was the idea, is that they were, if you put 2.5% going to a buyer's agent, then that in sense says that you're not negotiating with these other firms, and so therefore you are price fixing the commission. The case was really not about harming buyers or sellers. The case was really where attorneys found a position that they could go stand on and come after it with an antitrust. It really wasn't about the consumer or protecting buyers or sellers, and I think that's really important. The lawsuit, they won off of that price fixing argument, and the NAR settled with the case because they felt like that if they appealed it, they would lose in the appeal process. There just some random facts about that might be interesting to you. There were 8 jurors on the case that tried this case. They interviewed 80 jurors. There were 8 jurors, 4 of which had never bought or sold a house. They were all renters. 2 of which had worked with realtors, and the other 2 owned their homes but had never bought or sold. So there's a lot of layers of what happens in the case, but the bottom line of how it's going to impact you is that when they settled the case, there were 2 big things that came out of it. One is that the MLSs will no longer be able to advertise the commission rate that will be paid to a buyer's agent in the MLS form that has been typically used with MLSs. That's the number one. And then also the number 2 is that buyer's agents must have written agreements with their buyers that they're working with when they go out to tour homes. Something important to note is that North Carolina has always had written buyer's agreements. We've always had buyer's agency agreements, and we were only one of 12 states in the entire country that actually had that in place. So North Carolina has always been pretty cutting edge. We've always been very protective of that relationship, and we've always negotiated commissions. You can look today and see across the board that commissions may range from flat fee entry listings all the way up to 10% maybe for a small piece of land. So the commissions have always been negotiable. And so how it will impact you, there's many layers of how it's going to impact, but we really don't think it's going to have that much of an impact in our real estate market. We need buyer's agents, particularly in a market like Lake Gaston, where there's the nuances of dealing with waterfront and all that goes into buying and selling a waterfront property, and working in 2 states, North Carolina, Virginia, 5 counties, as you know. There's just so many layers of nuances that an agent really needs to know. So we don't expect it to have much of an impact as it relates to whether or not you're going to pay a commission. I think the misinformation has been, the rates are getting slashed, 5 to 6%. They're going to slash, commission rates. Those rates will probably really not change. It's just gonna be the way we communicate the rate. Because when I first started selling real estate, and Bernie and Chad can talk about this too, but we had a book. We didn't have the internet as we do today. And so we had a book, and you'd have to call the firm or see what their listing was in there. And then, and so that was always the case. And so nothing's really, now it's just going to be that we're gonna have to find another avenue for advertising these commission rates. And it's just, if there's a lot of good information on YouTube, and just in the news, there's a great website called facts.realtor. If you do care and want to go research it more, there's also some great attorneys who have taken and broken down this case. But bottom line, North Carolina has always really worked to protect the consumer. Our real estate commission works to protect the consumer. You can feel, and as a buyer and seller in this state, that you are very protected with our firms, with our contracts, and that these firms are gonna we're gonna continue to provide the same value that we've always provided.
Nice. Talking about the book, you tell people
How old we are.
I would like to add a couple things, Jeff. Number one is, like Crystal said, commissions have always been negotiable, so that's nothing new. And this settlement is not final. It has to be approved by the courts. So, have to remember those two things. Read a nice article yesterday where the attorneys, it's a very big lawsuit with a lot of plaintiffs. So the attorneys have submitted a request to the court for over $80 million in legal fees. So the people that are coming out on this are not the home buyers and sellers and consumers, it's the attorneys. The amount of the number of plaintiffs after it is settled at $4.18 million, the number of plaintiffs minus legal fees divided by the number of plaintiffs will end up earning about $10 each.
Yeah.
The amount of the settlement, again, is it 418 million?
418 million.
Yeah, 418 million, I'm sorry.
Okay,
So-
good information, so locally, it doesn't sound like it will have a large
No,
impact.
like Crystal said, it's really, North Carolina and Virginia have always had required written agency agreements, so that's nothing new. Commission's always been negotiable. We've got to figure out how we're going to communicate buyer commissions, because we cannot do that publicly in the MLS anymore. So we're working through that. North Carolina Realtors and Virginia Realtors are working to revise their forms as well. So it'll be little change to you, but a lot of change to us, simply from the record keeping and bookkeeping and communication aspects.
Chad, do you see this settlement impacting home values themselves?
I don't. I agree with Barney and Crystal. I think it's, like what Barney said, it's really going to affect the agents more so than buyers and sellers, and just how we go about our business is going to change. I don't think, but I do not think it will affect values at all in terms of the settlement just itself.
Jeff, also, this will happen in mid-July, just in case you want a time frame of when these changes are taking place. So I meet with a lot of sellers on a regular basis, and the question is like, do we need to do anything right now? And the answer has been no, because like Barney said, the lawsuit is not finalized, but we already have entered into the preliminary approval of the lawsuit, and right now we're in the 60-day period where every MLS across the country has to actually go in and fill out a form to say, yes, we are basically settling as well, saying we will abide by these new rules. And so we're in that process. Our MLS has done that. And then so in mid-July, this will have an impact. And what we expect, we're not sure what to expect yet. That's really the big topic of discussion, is how will this impact a seller? How will you see these commissions being paid? Is it going to be through closing costs, where a seller offers closing costs maybe to a buyer so that the buyer can then pay their own agent? Or is it going to be in the form of some type of bonus? I mean, we've been able to do creative things all, throughout time. It just was easiest to say, hey, I'll just pay your commission, because as you know, when you've been on the flip side of being a buyer, you're coming out of pocket so much. 20% to buy a home these days is a lot of money. And so to then have to tack on the buyer's agent fee on top of that is a lot. So we expect that sellers will still continue to pay that. It's just going to be, what will that look like? You can actually still agree to pay the commission for the buyer's agent as well. And so it's just a unique environment. I think it'll still be the same. And I think the big thing is that you, as a seller, if I were going to be selling my house right now, I would still very much want to figure out a way to compensate that buyer's agent. Number one, because you probably don't want to be in a dual agency situation necessarily, where you're working with a buyer and a seller as the same agent together on a listing. You may, if you want exclusive representation, you want to make sure that you offered something so that you get buyers to come. Buyers agents are not allowed to work for free, and that is something that it was also part of the agreement, was that firms cannot advertise that they'll work for free. Buyers agents cannot advertise that they'll work for free, because the National Association of Realtors feels so strongly that they provide such a sense of value. So in order for sellers to be able to attract buyers, they're going to want to still offer some type of commission to attract them.
Okay, let's move on from that topic, but still talk at a national level. Chad, talk about what we're seeing in terms of overall changes to the market. We've seen in the last few years significant increases in rent and home values. We've heard that this is COVID related, it's supply chain. But what factors at that national level are impacting the housing market and consequently eventually kind of rolling down and impacting us here at Lake Gaston?
Well, I'll never forget it. April of 2020, we were locked down, and my wife and I decided, let's just go out on the boat. And I'll never forget it. We rounded the corner, got onto the main lake, and it looked like 4th of July. And it looked like 4th of July weekend in April 2020 at Lake Gaston. And I said, what the heck is going on? And so I think this is a simple supply and demand situation. I mean, supply and demand always rules the day in most any business. With COVID, people flocked to get out of the cities. They came to a lot of people came to Lake Gaston and never been here. They rented houses. That's kind of when the rents went through the roof a little bit. And we had people that were here. Typically, you don't have a lot of houses that rent in the wintertime here. And a lot of houses were full, with people coming down. And I think Lake Gaston was discovered in a way that it had never been. And also, people came and they huddled up with a small group of people. I know a lot of people from Raleigh came up, and Richmond came down and stayed with friends and kind of just, stayed together. And I know I heard it probably 100 times. People said, well, if I'm going to be locked down in a house, I'm going to be on the waterfront. I'm not going to be in Raleigh at my house or Richmond at my house. So I just think it was supply and demand. And then all of a sudden people started calling, my phone started ringing about people wanting to look at houses. And the inventory was very low. And so I just think with that, combined with the fact that the Fed just dumped trillions of dollars into the economy over COVID, there's tons of cash, people with cash, and they're looking for a place to spend it. And Lake Gaston was one of those outlets. And so, with supply and demand, obviously, a lot more demand than the supply. We had the whole run for, I don't know, the better part of maybe 2 years, maybe more than that, 2.5, of multiple offer situations, pretty much all the time. I mean, 5, 8, 10, 12 offers. I'll never forget, I had a house, the client was like, I don't think we should list it until after the first of the year. This was Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. And we listed it the night before Christmas Eve at like 8 o'clock at night. Ended up having 17 showings the next day. And had 10 offers on Christmas Day. I mean, it just crazy. You know, it just went crazy. And we're not there anymore. We've shifted some from that. But I think that's, in my view, what spurred this kind of craziness on it.
Barney, talk about the current market a little bit in terms of inventory that Chad was talking about.
Well, inventory, you know, like Chad talked about, it comes down to economics 101, supply and demand. So, you know, when supply is down and demand is up, the prices go straight up. And that's what happened, has happened rather. But yeah, home prices on the lake on first quarter, median waterfront home sales price, the first quarter of 2020 was $450,000. In first quarter of 2024, it was about $785,000, $775,000. So yeah, that's a huge increase. Have the quality of the houses gone up that much? No, probably not. But yeah, I would feel safe to say that COVID increased sold prices here on the lake 25 to 35%.
So those prices, did that bring more homes out on the market? And are we still in a situation where supply is increasing, the availability, or that this thing settled out from this COVID period we talked about?
I just happen to have that right here, Jeff. New waterfront home listings in 2020, we had 328 hit the market. In 2023, we had 192 hit the market. And supply is still down. I personally don't see supply changing much in the next 12 months. Probably longer.
So you think we've kind of stabilized, the market is settled out from this?
Well, I wouldn't say stabilized, because when, you know, interest rates right now for a secondary home are above 8%. Plus the Fed has put fees on top of that. So, you know, we had a house come on the market Friday, I believe it was, in Elmer Garner Estates. Went on the market Thursday, Friday, multiple offers Sunday. The listing agent called for everybody's best and highest offer on Sunday, put a deadline of 7 p.m. Monday, and you know, I don't know how many offers I had, but it went under contract on Tuesday. So that house is priced at $800 in round numbers. So anything that hits the market less than $1 million, I'd say that's probably the high number. Then yeah, 750 to $1 million is going to be the sweet spot.
There's 17 houses listed right now between 1 and 2 million that are active.
And how does that compare with your listings?
And many of those are sitting.
How does that compare with your listings below $1 million?
Below $1 million is 25 houses. Below $1 million. But out of that 25, 1 can't have a dock, 4 are double wides, and 9 are in a community where you have a community slip and not your own boathouse. So, and some people just don't want that. Some people do. They don't mind it, but some people don't. And so, and then you've got 3 houses between 2 and 2.5 million.
So let me go from this conversation to Crystal. Tell us what you're seeing with today's typical buyer that's looking to buy here at Lake Gaston. Are they, and I guess this is relative, you know, from your time frame, you've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure, but are they younger? Are they older? Are we seeing more institutional buyers, people that are now interested in renting their property more than we've seen in the past?
Yes, that's a great question, and it's funny, I've been telling sellers a lot when I meet with sellers that I feel like I'm talking out two sides of my mouth right now, which is pretty typical for a shifting, stabilizing market that we're going into, where you may have a property under $1 million that gets, like Barney mentioned, that gets 5 offers on a weekend. Conversely, I have a home listed in Brunswick County that is listed at $230 a square foot versus the probably $500 a square foot that one's gonna close at. And then we even have one on the lake right now that's pending at $882 a square foot for a 1,400 square foot house on the main lake. $882 a square foot. That would be the highest comp, by the way, ever sold square footage wise on Lake Gaston. And there's another one listed, I think, for $1,000 a square foot, that's not sold yet. So when I say I feel like I'm talking on two sides, is that listing that I have is $230 a square foot, is sitting in Brunswick County, and it has not had any showings. And you can go in and look at the market and say, well, why is that? Because last summer, a couple of summers ago, all of these homes would have had showings. And there's probably a few reasons as to why, but I would say that there is probably a strong pointing to the rental market emerging as that a lot of these buyers, whether they're in their 60s, which the baby boomer, you talk about the national level of what's impacting the just sales across the country, the sheer amount of baby boomers in our economy right now spending money, cash savings that they've had, that they've stored up is so impactful to what's happening on the East Coast, coupled with buyers that are leaving California and leaving out west, leaving the politics or leaving because they have kids, they want to get them in different things out here. There's so many reasons why they're leaving besides, you know, taxes and that. But just that, and that's your younger set of buyers that's coming into. And so the buyer profile has changed where we have a mixed bag of baby boomers, coupled with younger, I would say 35 to 45, 50 years old buyers that are coming in, and they are mostly looking for the ability to rent. It doesn't mean they're going to rent the property, but I would say the majority of buyers I work with want the ability to rent the property should the bottom fall out, should our lifestyles change, should my kids get involved in hockey and have to travel around the country all year. That buyer profile is changing where they want that ability to rent. And I would say that's probably why somebody like the under $1 million is kind of flying off the charts. You know, those fly off the shelves. I wish we had a bunch of them. And then you get above like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. You get above that and buyers are like, oh gosh, that's a lot. I need to make sure I can rent this if something happens. Or also at that point, maybe I'll just go build what I want because I can buy a lot on Lake Gaston and new construction be in at $1.5 million at a pretty good rate. The buyers that I'm working with are typically looking for deep water, great views, great access to great water. I do have more buyers looking, and you know, we have other realtors in the room too. I'm sure they could speak to this as well, but we have, you know, we're talking about pools for the first time in a really long time. The ability to put in a pool, you know, do you have the permeable space to put in pools? That's something that for the first 10 years of my career, I mean, that was like a liability. You didn't even talk about a pool going in. It was like, oh no, fill that thing up with concrete. And now that's more of a, you know, an add-on. The buyer profile that I'm working with, this may be one of 2 to 3 to 4 homes they have. This may not just be it's not maybe just their one home. They could have multiple homes across the country. They're not all from Raleigh and Richmond. Maybe they've moved to Raleigh and Richmond, but they're coming from Northern Virginia. They've moved here from out west or different areas up north, and they've relocated, and then they're learning about Lake Gaston and bringing their funds into the lake. And so they're really wanting the lifestyle, so they want to know about where to go out to eat, you know, what is there to do in the area. They want to bring their money and spend it in our local area. You know, where's the coffee shop? Where's the best place to, you know, put my kids in a camp? Those are, you know, it's really a lifestyle that I feel like people are buying into, and when they come there, they're wanting me to tell them and show them that. I would say my baby boomer clients are all wanting garages. Like, you gotta have a garage. I need that workshop space or my toy space to park my cars. So it's definitely, you know, and I would say, you know, my big thing I ask people is like, are you gonna come full time? Because I feel like we're losing so many full-time residents off the lake, and it breaks my heart. I'm like, whenever I sell a house, I'm like, oh, the good ones always go. And it's the people that are like here and devoted and are working, they come and do this like you're doing. And I feel like we're losing a lot of that some of these, you know, you drive around on the lake on the summer, and I don't even see these homes occupied half the time. And it's shocking to me, you know, when we see these $3 million homes just sitting there, and it's because they have 2 or 3 of them. And so that's a shifting thing that we're going to have to kind of address, you know, and look at as a local economy of how do we retain people here, both on the local level for our workforce, and also just as a vacation destination. Do we want it to become that, or do we want to just maintain ourselves as this sleepy little residential, you know, area? And I think those are some of the big hot topics, but I know I digressed there a little bit, but I hope I answered the question about buyer profile.
Yeah, I think you did.
And so,
And a couple other questions. I'm curious though about what you said about full-time owners. Chad, do you see a shift that we're now having fewer full-time residents? Or is that...
I had quite a few people throughout COVID that decided to take, let's say, their house in Raleigh or Richmond or wherever they live, and downsize in the city, go to a condo or townhouse, and actually move here full-time. I don't know if that's prevalent. I don't, you know, we were just I was talking to Jane earlier, we're thinking maybe 60% of the lake is probably, you know, people that are not here, like 40% are full-timers, and about 60% are just here on weekends and stuff. So I don't think that has changed dramatically. I know in the restaurant space, we haven't seen a massive increase of, you know, revenue in the off season because a bunch of other people are here. So I don't really think there's a major shift there. I do, you know, of course, you do get the people that are working from home that want to still come up here and use the lake. I think the internet, what internet do you have is the very first question you get, right? A lot of times, I want to be able to come up here from my primary home and work from here on occasion, and so that ends up becoming a really big topic.
Could that be a deal breaker for someone?
It absolutely can be a deal breaker. I will say that I just had a house in an area that wasn't that great, and I'll tell you, Starlink has been a godsend for some people. Elon Musk has done a heck of a job with that, and you know, so a lot of people are going, because the old where you have the dish in the yard, I mean, that's like the internet's awful. So a lot of people are being able to go to Starlink, and that's been a huge help for people that are in more remote areas that don't have access to high-speed internet. But yes, that could be a deal breaker for somebody.
Okay, let's change the subject here a little bit. Short-term rentals, we talked a little bit about people are purchasing property now, they want to know if they can rent it. You mentioned Brunswick County, that may influence somebody purchasing a home in Brunswick County. But those folks that are purchasing and specifically have a plan to use that property for a short-term rental, do you see them asking questions like, well, how are my neighbors going to feel about this? Are there other rentals in this neighborhood? Are those potential buyers thinking about me that live down the road from them, for instance? Is that?
Yeah, I think they do. I don't know really, I really haven't had anybody who was kind of nonchalant about it. I think Crystal is exactly right. A lot of people don't have any interest in renting, but they don't want somebody to tell them that they can't. Because if anything changes in their life, they want that ability. Because when you tell somebody that's in a house that has 4 or 5 bedrooms and 3 or 4 baths, that they can probably get $4,500 to $5,000 a week out of their house, their eyes light up. And they're like, okay, and like Crystal said, if you have younger kids and they're playing travel ball, and you can't come to the lake as much, they want the ability, even though a lot of people have no interest in renting. They don't want their house to be taken over by people they don't know. But they just don't want somebody to tell them that they can. But I do think that they're very cognizant of, in any market, in anything, whether you're at the beach or the lake, are you gonna have a bad apple or two? Sure. Yeah, but I think the majority of people that come, because of what they're paying, you typically have people that are gonna, I would think, respect the property and treat it well, and I'm not in property management, so I can't speak to the kind of calls that they get, at night or whatever. But I think people are very aware and want people to take care of their home and not disrupt the neighborhood.
Marty, are you doing any rentals?
No, I don't do any rentals either. But I agree with what Chad is saying. It's not like it was 10 years ago when they were renting for under $1,000 a week. And then you got a lot of people that did not take care of the rental property, that did not care about the neighbors. But I think they actually do care about the neighbors, care about the environment as well, and people they want, if they do rent, they want somebody obviously to take care of their home. And $5,000 a week, you've got the kind of people that will do that. Something else that people think about too, number one, they don't want the county to tell them they can't rent, but they always look for resale value. So, if it's an issue with them, it's going to be an issue if they have to sell it as well. So.
Yeah, and they do look also, we look really hard at the septic system. I know that's on here. If it's a 3-bedroom septic, they want to try to change it to a 4. We get the septic, people out to see if another line can be run. Because the last thing anybody wants to do is for a septic system to fail because of people in the house. So that's always not a concern, but it's something that they take pretty seriously too.
Well, changing topic here a little bit. Glenn Hart is in the audience. He's with Dominion. Most of you probably know Glenn. He's responsible for Dominion's shoreline management plan. My next question is in regards to buyers' knowledge about the lake, specifically Dominion shoreline management plan, and how that impacts them. I guess I'll start with you, Crystal. Is this an area that your typical buyer is educated? Do they ask the right questions? Do you have to lead them to the trough to drink, so to speak? Or are they knowledgeable enough to ask the right questions?
They are not. In my opinion, you don't know what you don't know, right? And you go into an area and you don't know, your friends told you about the lake and they come in, they just wanna learn, but there is a willingness to learn. But it is my experience that we as agents probably do not do as good of a job, or maybe we just, it maybe a part of it is not asking the right questions, but also just that we have to do a better job of educating consumers about our market as it relates to Dominion, shoreline, and also septic systems and use on our, all of the nuances that go into owning a property. I would say that, there has been a little bit of a hands-off approach. That's Dominion. Dominion owns the shoreline, and really most realtors are, the rules and regulations are Dominion's, and so it is our job to say, look, here's the website where Dominion's rules are, this is where they are, and you can go and research them. I had a disclosure prepared years ago so that I could say to a buyer, I'm going to tell you kind of what I know, but ultimately Dominion is in control, and here's the name of Bubba and the phone number, and you can call him and talk to him about any questions you have, because I do feel like there's a little bit of it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission mindset when it comes to buyers and maybe even sometimes owners on the lake. And so it's important to help them see Dominion as a group that will work with them if they'll reach out. And so, but I do find that most of our buyers are, now that the prices have come up so much, buyers are far more critical about the investment they're making. They do ask a lot more questions. And we're not getting a lot of just sheer investor clients. If you go into any of the metropolitan areas, there's people buying up condos and townhomes and all types of, even just single residence homes for Airbnb properties. And I'm talking like, Chinese investors with credit cards going in and buying up 6 homes in a neighborhood, and investment groups doing that. And we're not seeing that at the lake. We're still very much, in my opinion, the American dream, and where buyers are coming in, they want to be on the lake with their families and create a legacy property. And so they are I do feel like we have better stewards. I just feel like we have to have, it's our job. We're kind of usually their first point of contact, and it's our job just as ethical stewards ourselves of being realtors to help educate them to what they're buying.
Barney, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, one thing that I do, and Crystal does the same, this is my book that I carry with me all the time. So when I first sit down with clients, I said, tell me what you know about Lake Gaston. And they say, oh, we used to come up here and we vacation and we know Joe and Ann and they're good neighbors and the water's wonderful. So, that's how you really don't know anything. So, my first page is a plat, and I go through the Dominion, shoreline management plan. I've got a copy. I read a newspaper article about 3 or 4 years ago, kind of summarizing the construction procedures in 3 pages rather than 41 pages. So, and I give them a copy of that. And I tell them, flat out, nobody owns waterfront property all Lake Gaston except Dominion property, Dominion Energy, and we own to their property. So, I do that right up front, so there's no misunderstanding, and I have a disclosure they sign as well. So, once you explain that to them, like Crystal said, they're looking at their investment. So, and I explained it to them in a positive way that it helps the investment of your property by managing the lake and the resources of the lake. So,
I think to kind of,
yes, sir.
Some people don't want to pay for them, but every lot is different, right? I can't visually go and tell on every lot where the high water mark is. And so I'm a huge proponent of surveys. I'm sure we all are, right? Because the surveyor that we use typically is going to mark, they're going to stake the high water mark. Because you always get the question, I want to take out a bunch of trees. Okay, well, you can do that on your side of the fence, but you gotta get permission to do it on their side. And the problem is, where is that mark? At Carr Lake, there's a big orange circle around a tree. It's pretty obvious where your high water mark is. It's not at Lake Gaston, because it's different on every lot. So, and we are really the first point of contact when it comes to these folks. And like Crystal and Barney said, trying to educate them as to, just the other day, we were on a dock, and there's some willow weed on the shoreline. And the guy goes, he's talking to his wife, like, I can get that out with whatever. I said, no, you gotta get permission to get that out, and I can go and tell you what the answer's gonna be. It's gonna be no. They're not gonna let you touch the weed. So he's like, okay, yeah, I got it. So you just have to, and they'll ask you, do you think they'll let me do this? And at the end of the day, I think we just had our annual meeting with Glenn and the realtors with Dominion, and I think it's a symbiotic relationship, it's a partnership between realtors and Dominion, and we literally just say, you gotta call them, you have to apply, well, I'll help you through that process. Glenn's been great about, I'll come out and meet you on site, tell you what you can do, what you can't do. But at the end of the day, until you know where that high water mark is and it's staked, I'm not very comfortable in saying a whole lot. You know what I mean?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, property owners that we run into, it's not uncommon when we're doing our environmental that we hear these questions about what can I do here, and water willow, and it's really amazing to me the number of people that aren't well educated about shoreline management and the environment factors here at Lake Gaston and how we're actually managing the invasives. But, so this is going to be my final question to y'all, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. Is there a role for the Lake Gaston Association to help educate not only potential buyers, but other residential property owners out here on the lake about the environmental aspects, benefits of the native vegetation, for instance, and what we're doing with invasives? Do you see LGA having a role there, and do you have a suggestion or recommendation as to how we can improve our outreach? Okay, you got 1 minute. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's obviously a need, and how to go about it, that's a $1 million question. A few years ago, we had a program with the realtors that we would send y'all names, and y'all would sign them up and give them free newsletters and free membership for the first year. And I thought that was going over well, and you stopped it.
Well, to be honest with you, and Brian can, respond to this, we had very little follow through. Some people didn't even know that they were given a free Lake Gaston Association membership. And frequently, when we would contact those people after they got the 1 year free, it was like, well, who are you and what are you? So there definitely is room for improvement.
There's a difference in sending somebody literature and having them read it. So that's the fine line that you can run into.
Chad?
I mean, just the taping of the meetings, I think is a big deal. I mean, I watch certain council meetings or county meetings because I don't have time to go to the meeting. You can go on YouTube and find the meeting and see it. So I think that's a big plus. Certainly social media is where everybody lives, unfortunately. So any kind of outreach you can do with that. But, I think people, I think people care about the lake and they want to keep it as pristine as they can. I mean, you're gonna have, like I said, you're always gonna have a bad apple or two that just, this is my waterfront, and I don't really care who owns it. You're gonna have that. I'm sure Glenn can give you 100 stories as to what he's run into, but I think the majority of people respect and love the fact that this is kind of a sanctuary. It's their getaway. It's not the city, and they want to do whatever they can to to keep it as clean and as nice as they can. And it's funny, you'll have everybody every once in a while that'll say, well, if I do so-and-so, who's going to turn me in? I mean, who's going to care? I said, your neighbor. Your neighbor will be the one to call Dominion. Look at Glenn. Your neighbor will be the one to call Dominion or call the HOA, so, I'm not saying that everybody's out there, just riding around trying to create drama. That's not what I'm saying. But people watch, people look, people notice. And so I think the majority of people do honestly care about it. I really do.
I think video, and I'll echo Chad, I think video on social media would be a big improvement. I have a video, I put together a video on my website with that, and I get a lot of compliments on that. But I think unfortunately, we do look at Facebook way too much. So any information that you can put out there on social media would be a big plus.
Crystal?
Yeah, I agree. I kind of had a brain lapse about that. Yeah, I think like you guys coming out it too is just a resource for buyers, like maybe creating some type of like what do you need to know about living at Lake Gaston and doing that through the social media channels, maybe in partnership with the realtors. Helping provide you some information. Like for example, I have a whole thing on septic tanks that is there's a lot of information out there. EPA is a great resource actually for regarding septic, and I'd be happy to share some of that back with you. But maybe seeing something that where the realtors, like if you establish yourselves as kind of a resource for new homeowners on the lake, and then we as the realtors can say, gosh, the Lake Gaston Association is a great resource for new homeowners on the lake, and they have a lot of resources regarding septic tanks and Dominion, and they have relationships with those people, and they're available for questions because a lot of them live here full time, and a lot of them have gone through the trenches of applying for permits and those things. Those are all great things. I mean, it's like anywhere else in the world, like churches or wherever else, you've got like all these members, and there's a very few portion of them that are probably really in the trenches doing things. And I think that's the same in the realtor community here. And we have over, 150 realtors, more than 150 realtors, and there's probably only, I think in my little network, maybe 20 of us that I really talk to on a regular basis that are really in the trenches working and doing this job full time and trying to make a living and live full time. We have a lot of absent sellers and absent homeowners, and I think that they're just not educated, and maybe sometimes it's not right in front of them. So they're here for the summer, they're on the lake, they're enjoying it, they're not really thinking about the larger picture of what it means to own a home here. So
Yeah. And some of the older, the first residents of the lake, I bought my first house in 96, I believe, and a permit was $5, and now it's $600. So, a lot of things have changed with Dominion, and back in the early 90s or 80s or 70s, nobody was educating people about the lake. There's a lot of old timers that still think today that they own all the way to the water. So, and I'm sure Glenn has heard that as well. So, it's an education process, and we have evolved, and we have to evolve that education, the way we communicate that education.
That's very good input. Appreciate it. Okay, I think what I'd like to do now is I'm going to turn it over to the audience, and how we're going to do this is since we're recording this, we want to be sure that the questions are heard by the panelists and for the video. You want to turn that on? I think a key thing you'll find here is that you need to hold the microphone like this, right here.
We can hear.
Okay. So raise your hand. Tammy will come around and hand you the mic. She'll essentially recognize you for your question. And if you would please, if you have it for a specific panelist, say their name and then follow up with your question.
This is a question to the panel in general. 2 years out, if you look into your fortune ball, where will the supply, demand, pricing of Lake Gaston properties be?
Well, I'll jump on that. I personally feel it's going to be about the same as it is now. And I read the 𝐂𝐤𝐿 index, which is a index of 20 or 30 large cities that measure the increase or decrease in housing prices. And I read 𝐂𝐤𝐿 stats came out yesterday, day before yesterday. They were up 6.4% in February in these big cities. So
That's an annual year-over-year increase?
yes, yep, in February, this February versus last February. So I don't know that we're gonna see a 6% increase every month. We can't handle that, but I don't know of any place that can handle that. But I think prices are gonna increase. Right now, we're in a situation where mortgage rates are high. So when you see mortgage rates come down, if they ever do, that's going to increase the number of buyers that can buy. And that's going to ultimately increase prices with the supply that we have. And I don't see that supply changing much. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
I also think if you look at what's happening outside of our borders, you go into Raleigh. I mean, Raleigh grew 80% in the last 3 years. 80% of growth, and that's projected. There's another 11% that they're projecting for 2024. I mean, they're expecting Raleigh to double, more than double in size. And Richmond's seeing growth, but it's not quite as staggering. Raleigh is staggering. The clients that I have coming out of California that I talk to are saying that, this is reminding them of what happened when they lived near Google and when they were, had small places there that suddenly, the rates went crazy. You look at what's happening with rents. And so when you look at the Raleigh corridor and you look at what's happening there, I really think that Lake Gaston is really posed, particularly on the southwest quad of the lake and the northwest quad of the lake, to be positioned to be almost full-time, more full-time residents coming in. The 401 corridor that comes out of Raleigh, North Carolina, there are small little suburb town, small little sleepy towns that are dotting that are having explosions of growth right now. And as that works its way towards Warrenton, which is only a couple of miles from the lake, you're looking at that. There's also this S-Line project. I don't know if any of you are staying in the loop with the S-Line high-speed rail project, but that, $1 billion was just approved for that. That is happening in the build and design plan, and that is going to cross our lake at that old CSX line. And that is pretty cool that we're going to have this connector between Raleigh and Richmond. And so the towns of Norlina, Warrenton, up to Bracy, across that area. There's just no telling. Of course, that's looking long range. Is that going to be, 10, 15, 20 years in our lifetime? The project's been on the docket for 20 years now already, so it seems like it's never going to happen. But just when I look at what's happening in all those old bedroom communities working its way out, I think that we will continue to see increases with the buyers that are moving in from other areas, bringing their cash and having the ability to come and buy these homes and potentially even live for more full-time eventually. I think we have to get amenities in place to be able to keep them here is the key. We got to keep people.
Yeah. Chad, we've seen up on the west end of the lake, you have that Microsoft impact.
Huge. Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but in Mecklenburg County, Virginia. I live in Bracy, Virginia. I live on a little 20-acre farm that adjoins a subdivision, and we have a waterfront, a lot with a boathouse and golf cart down there and all that. But my office is in South Hill. And Microsoft has been in Mecklenburg County for about 10 to 12 years. They have just, in the last year, purchased all of the industrial parks in Mecklenburg County for data centers. They are, there's about 3,000 contractors on the ground, electricians, plumbers, engineers, crane operators, the whole 9 yards. And they're, according to the general contractor that I know fairly well, they've got another 10 to 15 years at least of land to build out that they already have. And that's if they don't buy any more land. So it's Microsoft's largest data center in the world is located in Mecklenburg County, Virginia. And it has been a huge, you can go to a lot of restaurants in town and where you maybe normally I would know most everybody. I don't know hardly anybody because it's, a lot of contractors. Pretty much Microtel and Holiday Inn Express, they're full of contractors. There's not enough housing, rental property, to house all of these folks. So that's been a huge, it's very much a double-edged sword, right? Again, it's the supply and demand. You've got all these people on the ground that need a place to live. And so where it used to be, not even maybe 5-6 years ago, say a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you could rent for $700 to $800 a month. Now it's $1,300 to $1,400 a month. So, when you're local and you live here, it's a harder because those rates have gone up. But the county and the towns have really tried hard to figure out a way to bring in more housing. So we'll see. There's more complexes being built and stuff like that. But it's
Okay, we had another question over here.
Yeah, my question is to the short-term rental and some of the issues that short-term rentals have on the quality of life to the full-time resident, which my wife and I are full-time. Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. I could go on and on about it, but very, very briefly, we've been here, we've owned for 22 years, lived here full-time since 2015. Our family goes back to 1974. They actually bought one of the first lots in Ferncliff. So we've seen the evolution of everything, like full-term, short-term rentals to where it's at now. Obviously, there's some issues with short-term rentals in general, but we formed a committee in our subdivision to look at short-term rentals. We looked at eliminating them, and we quickly realized you can't do that. I mean, you get into the legalities of what you can do with your own home. We looked at septic systems very hard, and then we also looked at occupancies. And the final thing was developing rules and regulations that are a little bit more stringent and having the homeowners enforce those. That's really what we got to, and it's helped some. But it's to the point we have 12 short-term rentals, and we've had 9 of those in the last 5 to 6 years. And I just see no end to this. We have 4 of them directly across the code from us. Every week, it's somebody new. Most of the people are good, it's not an issue, but we never know. It's the anxiety that is driving me crazy. I never know who I'm gonna get. Yeah. So consequently, our future is in doubt right now. I mean, our kids are growing up here in the lake, and we have grandchildren. We don't know that we're gonna be here for them. So I guess it's more of a comment, but my questions are, where do you see the short-term rental market going in the future? I dealt with a couple individuals from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission on the occupancy issue, and I'm sure you're quite aware that real estate agents cannot misrepresent the occupancy of a house. Yet I see with VRBO and Airbnb, they're well over the septic limit, and this continues. And some of these people that are sponsoring the house on VRBO are in fact real estate agents. So is there any resolution of that? I mean, I think the biggest issue is occupancy. We have houses that have 16, 20 people in them, and it just causes chaos. So I'll leave you with that.
I'll just start with, I do see in metropolitan areas, one of the things they're doing is the zoning permits, that they are issuing zoning permits. So, you know, we don't have a lot of that in our area. We don't have where if you have a short-term rental, that you have to get a zoning permit. And one of the ways the county can kind of hold more owners of, you know, to that occupancy on their Airbnbs is to issue those zoning permits with, and part of that is checking the septic system that it meets, like how are you advertising this? And those are, if you go into Nashville, Tennessee, or any other major, even in Raleigh, North Carolina, theirs are a little bit antiquated. I don't know about Richmond, but I know in Raleigh they do have zoning permits that you actually have to obtain in order to rent your house. And that is one layer. I mean, you're right. I'm seeing across the board that counties are having a hard time enforcing any ordinances. In Brunswick County, we have cases of people that are continuing to rent their homes, even though there is an ordinance that states that if you're in a certain type of zoning, that you cannot have short-term rentals, and they have sent, you know, they've said, I'm just gonna keep renting. What are you gonna do to me? And truthfully, they've not been able to do much to them. And so I do think there is a reality of that. You go to the beaches and, you know, any type of big metropolitan, and there are rentals. And so how do we address it? I think is a very good question. And we, you know, and it is a double-edged sword. You want people here, you want to drive. Do we want to get more businesses? Do we want to drive our economy? You know, do we want people to come and spend money? And because they do, when they come, they go to the restaurants and they frequent and they spend money, so we want them. But I think that's one thing that I've noticed that, you know, is maybe lacking, that we could do is more of the permitting that just would help document it, because that is one way to come after it. What happens eventually is those septic systems fail if they are overusing the septic system, and the county can then override their ability to go back and get a larger septic system. In Virginia, you don't have repair areas necessarily. You don't have repair areas, and so they can jeopardize themselves, or they can actually not get a septic permit reissued, or it would be issued at lower occupancy if they overuse those systems. So a lot of it's going to go back to educating our homeowners about their septic systems and the, you know, detriment to that. But I think it's inevitable of what we're seeing, that I think this is, whether it's going to increase. I've actually sold 4 Airbnbs since COVID, that they came in during COVID. They went in with this big idea of they're going to Airbnb their property, and they kind of got into it and they were like, this isn't for us. We're not running it as much. The market's saturating a little bit with Airbnbs and Verbos, so they wanted out. And so I've now been on the resale side of 4 of those in the last 6 months, which I think is kind of telling too, that it may settle itself out a little bit. Because people still want great water view, and some of these rentals that went up are just not great rental type properties. So
I'd like to add a couple things. One of the things that you mentioned was VRBO, and you've seen those rentals with over occupancy. The Real Estate Commission gives us our licenses, and they are over top of us. Unless you're a licensed realtor, the Real Estate Commission has no jurisdiction. So that's an issue as well. But like Crystal said, it's going to go back to the counties. You know, I've been hearing about ADU, accessory dwelling units, and it's been a lot in the newspaper in the Raleigh and Durham area, that zoning, if they allow you to put this tiny house in your backyard as a rental, it has to be permitted and it has to go through zoning. We don't have that. So, you know, until we do, I don't know that a lot's going to change.
Well, let me just, on your VRBO thing, in the commission, I fully agree with you that you are under law, that you cannot misrepresent. And years ago, they used to be listed on real estate sites, I guess. And I remember seeing statements, occupancy is limited to 2 people per bedroom. But some of these VRBO people that show a sponsor, they are in fact real estate agents, and I'm assuming licensed real estate agents. Why are they not under the same restrictions as you are?
Because they've not been caught.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And going back to the septic thing, the county, I've talked to all the counties, all the environmental people in the counties around the lake, and they will flat out say, if you see a problem with a rental or a septic system in your neighborhood or wherever, you call us and that will be addressed. So.
Yeah, I did, but they said there has to be a breach of the system.
There has to be a failure of the
Failure of the
system for.
system. That's what it's all gonna boil down to, it's septic.
And most people, for $350, you can have your system pumped. So they'll get it pumped every month, every other month, and typically that maintains the system fairly well.
And they're bringing in $5,000 a week.
Yeah, so I don't.
afford that.
And the other thing too is, as homeowners, you gotta think to yourself, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's like if I wanna have no rentals in my area, and I understand that, but then when you go to sell your house, if you have a hard time selling it, because the people that want to purchase want to be able to rent it, but you're in a neighborhood, a HOA, or a county that doesn't allow it, your house may sit a little bit. Maybe you get a little bit less money for it, So it's kind of a double-edged sword, when it comes to that.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, I have one. I have several actually, but there's
Who's your question for?
for the panel as a whole, okay? Let me get mine. So we talked initially about the commission and the settlement. This morning, there was an article online this morning about a major real estate organization agreeing to a settlement for $80 million outside of the big settlement. Okay, I think that has an impact. It's going to have an impact in the future. My question that comes out of that is, why does a buyer's agent have to know what the commission is? Because in the past, there's been a lot of companies that offer to list your homes for less than 6%. And if you use them, you got virtually no activity. So why? What's the reasoning behind that? And the second question I have is, what is the Real Estate Association around Lake Gaston doing to promote additional services that are needed, such as the groceries, additional restaurants, internet, medical care, emergency services at schools? Because these have a major impact on people coming here, living, and making their full-time home, especially younger couples.
That's a great question.
Well, I'll start out. One of the main reason we don't have any more commercial growth here is the septic situation. And Warren County wanted to expand the Littleton sewer system to the lake. The Littleton sewer system was built back in the 40s, or maybe even late 30s, and it's antiquated and it just cannot handle the capacity. You're talking about $100 million plus to put a septic system in the lake area, and the counties just cannot afford that. So that is going to limit your commercial growth. Internet is coming. Internet is, if we were talking internet 10 years ago, it was pretty much non-existent, and now it's wonderful. So compared to what it was. Bugs Island Telephone did
Empower.
Empower. Then that's fiber optic. It's the best there is. Spectrum is around the other areas of the lake. CenturyLink has improved. To grow EMC, EMS stations, that goes back to the county. There's nothing that the Realtor Association can do about that. It goes back 100% to county funding. And when Jeff started the meeting off, Warren County is going to take funding away from the volunteer fire department and give it to senior citizen centers and so forth. That's not going to be at the lake. That's going to be in Warrington, I'm assuming. So counties are scratching and trying to dig up more income to fund these projects. But it all goes back to the counties.
What was your question on the commission?
Yeah, can you ask it again? That was fun.
Okay, in the past, I have bought and sold because my job transferred me a lot. My wife and I have been married, in a couple of weeks, we'll have been married 58 years. And we have had 27 addresses. I'm very familiar with the buying and selling. Okay? I've only ever had one real estate agency, who in good faith negotiated a commission. And it was not in North Carolina or Virginia. The question I have is because many real estate agencies out there offer to list your home for less than the 6%. So why does the buyer's agent need to know what the percent of the commission is in order to be able to show my house?
Well, the question then is, well, when I go to my employer and I want to get a job, I'm gonna, if they wanna hire me, I'm gonna ask them how much are they gonna pay me, right? I may not want the job if I don't know what I'm going to be paid. And so as a buyer's agent is separate from a seller's agent, so if I'm working with that buyer, it's important that I know that I am going to be compensated for my time and effort. So that's at the basic level, but I don't know that that's what you're asking, or I feel like
What I'm asking is, when it comes down to the time to sell the house, and somebody's writing a contract, okay, to buy my house, why does the buyer's agent negotiate with me, the seller, instead of having to know before the contract is written? Because this is not really a negotiation process that involves the seller.
Seller pays no anything.
right.
Because they don't represent, you're represented by another
Yeah,
agent.
you don't have a direct contractual.
So you don't have a direct
relationship.
contractual
I
relationship.
fully understand that. I spent my entire career negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. I fully understand it. Go back to my question, is why will an agent, if is listed in MLS, if my commission rate is listed at 4% instead of 6%, why will they not show my house? That's why, and we know that happens.
Right, and that's like, why would you go buy Lake Gaston pizza for $10? Like if I get to choose where I buy pizza on the weekend, I may go buy a $10 pizza from Lake Gaston Pizza, or I might spend $15 and get a Hen and the Hound pizza for $20. Why do we do anything? Why do we go to McDonald's in different areas and the prices are different? The prices are reflective of what you're
making my point, Crystal,
Yeah.
okay? Because as the buyer, okay, I choose what I pay for the product. But as the buyer, I don't get to choose how much of that commission, because I have to pay 100% of it. So how much at this present time, how do I know, okay, as the seller, that buyer is getting the services they need? Because the seller of the buyer's agent is making a decision to show my property based on how much money they're going to make for showing it. You just said it, okay? And I agree with that, okay? But why, if my house is out here and it's $100,000 and it's got a 6% commission rate, or it's $100,000 and it's got a 4% commission rate, why does it make a difference? Why won't they show my house at 4%? You're saying because you got to get paid. Well, when I look at the cost of the last house I sold, I paid $60,000 in commission. Okay? So what did my agent do for me? The buyer's agent I'm talking about. What did they do for me other than sign a contract?
They bring a buyer to you. Let's move on. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I'll be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, carry on with that conversation after.
But I will say this just real quickly, you will be able, with the new real estate rules, Louis, you will be able to negotiate directly with a buyer's agent at the point of contract, and the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is creating a new form that will be available so that buyers and sellers can actually negotiate direct. Now, it will be through the agent that's representing, but that you will be able to negotiate directly.
Thank you. That's what I
If you-
wanted to get out.
If you choose to go that way.
Yeah, if you choose to go that way.
My name's Daniel Boham, aka Scooter. People that know me, but on the lake. I'm president of an HOA in Heather Glen in Pretty Creek. And Front Cliff's right across Pretty Creek from us. I want to get back to the short-term rental issue. That was some good questions he had and good comments from y'all. I know we're very limited. I understand that. We have a few issues too. We have friends in HOAs all around the lake that have some problems, have had problems, and recourses. So I want to ask you, as a president of an HOA, what is our recourse and what are the things that we can do to minimize problems, whether it be permitting or in our bylaws having limitations and policies on what to do and not to do in proper protocol, courtesy, what have you. So what are your thoughts that would help us with that?
It's a great question.
I think,
And I don't know if any of us can answer that, but.
yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
communication, you know, like
Yeah.
you've got some great role models of some people who've tried to do some things in their subdivisions, but to me, the communication and actually bringing your stakeholders, your other owners together to form a committee to address it as a community of how are we going to address this, because you certainly don't want to, alienate into people who are trying to, rent their homes to offset. I mean, maybe they could never have a lake house if they couldn't rent their homes, and they're providing this, they're there 5 weeks a year and they get to do that with their grandkids, and it's super. So, that communication, creating rules and regulations within the community is something a lot of subdivisions are now doing. That may make somewhat of an impact, but again, it's in educating the renters about what they're renting. And the rules and regulations and there's so many layers of different things you can do in that regards, but ultimately it's going to come down to your HOA deciding what is important for your community, and I think communicating within your group, because overturning short-term rentals there's just a precedence that is not going to happen in either of these states.
And
I think one of the most important things is to communicate any issues that you're having with renters to those homeowners and get those homeowners involved in setting some rules and regulations, for the neighborhood and for themselves, and maybe having those rules in writing in the rental house, or email them or whatever to the potential renter. But communications could be the key.
the other thing is, I was a HOA president. I feel your pain. And we actually, the subdivision that my waterfront lot is in, we created the subdivision. It was the HOA. It was back in the early 2000s, and when the market crashed, they lost it to the bank. And anyway, the HOA was pretty much non-existent. So me and another gentleman got that going again, did the covenants, the bylaws, and all that. At the end of the day, I think probably your question is more for an attorney, honestly, because that's a legal document. Those are all legal documents that I think to get a good attorney, pay them some money and figure out what you can do, what you can't do is really important. Because at the end of the day, even when people ask us, hey, I see in this covenant, and the covenant's for whatever, I can put a fence up, but I can't, do you think they'll let me put a chicken fence up?
Right.
I can't speak for them. I do not interpret covenants.
Absolutely not.
It's a legal document, and I say you need to call your attorney. But I do know, but
Or the
to
president of the HOA.
yeah, but to answer, there is an HOA that I believe they have to submit, it's approved, it's kind of automatically approved, but they have to submit the rental agreement of some sort. So in other words, the HOA knows who's gonna be in the neighborhood, what the names are, roughly how many people, and their contact. So if there is a problem at the house, you at least have that information. I mean, maybe at a basic level, you could do that. So at least you can walk down there and say, hey, it's 2 a.m, you guys are partying on the dock or whatever. That's just not acceptable. So, but, like you said, communication and kind of knowing who's there is probably a good first step.
I mean, we don't have a lot of local resources for, like when you get involved in the noise, at midnight, people are making noise. I mean, you think about the different places you can go to get help for what we're doing. And, when you've got noise, or, we don't have a ton of, there is a noise ordinance to some degree, but it's, just so many things at the county level are so loose. And not that that's a bad thing, because, that, depending on how you feel about that, you may want less of that. But when it comes to, when it starts impacting you so directly like that, you may want to go to the county and get involved to figure out how we can, again, go after these zoning permits. I think that would be one way to try to at least get people to have to go through a process to make their property a short-term rental versus just buying it and slapping it on the internet and not really being educated. And so I agree with Chad that we have to be careful not to interpret HOA covenants and rules and regulations. The HOAs, we do have a pretty good constituency of HOAs, and I don't know if you guys all get, I don't think there is a group of HOA constituents all getting together, but that would be something maybe the Lake Gaston Association look to do, is bring these HOAs together and have a forum just like this where you're all together and sharing ideas, because it is something that we don't want it to we want it to be a positive for people to come and bring their families here and spend money in our local economy. For these locals that work here and run businesses here, we want to continue to see Lake Gaston succeed.
That's one of the things too, that Lake Gaston Community Information Facebook, those pages, they're full of people who want more services. We need a car wash, we need a Bojangles, we need a this, we need a that. Well, guess what? The only way that you're ever gonna get any of that is to have vacationers here. They do drive the economy. And, whether you want more services or don't want more services, those are the people. I can tell you from owning another business, you got 16 weeks at this lake to make money. And the other weeks, you are losing money, period. You are, all the businesses. That's why we have so little, because it is very, very difficult to make it from mid-October to mid-March. This place is dead for the most part. And that's okay. That's okay. But for businesses to survive, they've got to survive those months. And so we're a very seasonal place. The one thing too about short-term rentals is they're there for a week and then they're gone. You never know, you could also have a bad neighbor who's there permanent. So what are you gonna do? Are you gonna, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a double.
So just real quickly, one more, just thanks going, one more question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it off?
No,
Oh, battery.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you without.
So one more question you touched on, about bylaws and covenants. So as realtors, when you go to closings, that has to be disclosed if there's covenants or HOAs or whatever. So is there a signature from that buyer dated and officiated that says that they've received that document and they have acknowledged that document and agreed to that document.
There is in
In
Virginia,
Virginia, there is.
not in North Carolina.
Is that right?
And I will say my personal experience, and I'm not knocking attorneys in the area, but there are some attorneys that are really good at bringing those covenants to the closing table and going through those, and then there's a lot that are not. And there's a lot of closings that happen where, you know,
No knowledge?
no knowledge,
Well,
and I don't wanna
Yeah,
mislead
and also,
them.
you've got some very good realtors in the area that give that information to their buyers before closing, and even giving it to people before they sign the contract. So, and there's some realtors that don't, so.
And I will tell you, if you're in Virginia, Virginia just changed this back in July. In Virginia now, they treat HOA as just, it's a community interest situation. So it used to be only condos or townhouses, you had to get this full-blown disclosure from the HOA about the budget, the finances of the HOA, the finances of that community, all of these, I mean, it's a packet. I bought a condo in Wintergreen. There's like 400 pages of stuff to read through on a community like that. But, so now what's happened in Virginia though is now HOAs are in that same boat. So now you've got poor secretaries of HOAs in Virginia who are having to do a tremendous amount of work, and they're volunteers, right? You're volunteers.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, that community interest statement is about 25 pages. And so when a lot or a house goes under contract, the agent reaches out to the HOA and they have to provide that document. And that document follows all the way to the closing date. And they sign off that they read it and all of that. But it shows what the dues are, when they're due. Are there any, HOA dues that they owe, that they haven't paid? What is the HOA in charge of? It's their finances, the checking account balance, the budget for next year. Is pretty detailed. And, but that's, like he said, that's in Virginia, not North Carolina.
One more question. Jane, did you?
Oh, I was just going to say, we found out the name of the person, the owner of the short-term rental, and every time we had a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, we call that person.
Here you go.
And after about 3 or 4 calls,
Yeah, exactly.
it got a little bit better, because right after we called that owner, we called the sheriff, and they dropped in on Mecklenburg County, and they called the owner. We made sure of that, so
Yeah, I think
kind of, God helps those that help themselves.
Yeah, I think it's very important that the owners know what's going on. And yeah, that's a great idea. Call them at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I want to thank the panelists for your time. Great conversation, good information. Thanks again. And maybe you can stay a little bit longer as things are breaking up and answer a few more questions. But thanks again for your time. We appreciate it.